Hey Rugby friends, it's LeAnn again, a volunteer with Historic Rugby. We're getting ready to do another edition of Reading and Rugby for Kids. I'm actually standing outside of the Thomas Hughes Public Library, opened in 1882. That is where we were. We were inside the last couple times we've read a story, and we wanted to show you the outside of our beautiful library. We're actually going to go inside and get ready to read another story. See you then. Here we are. We are now inside of the Thomas Hughes Public Library. We are sitting at one of the library tables, and you can see we've actually got two books in front of us today. We're going to be reading Abe Lincoln, The Boy Who Loves Books, written by Kay Winters, illustrated by Nancy Carpenter. Now, this is one of our very favorite books, and we actually found a book in our library that was also about Abraham Lincoln. Now, before I touch this book, I've got to put on some very special gloves to be sure that the oils from our fingers don't damage the pages, because I will tell you, this book over here, this blue one, it says Abraham Lincoln on the cover. This book is from 1882, and it's all about Abraham Lincoln's life. And right here in the very front, we've got a very good picture, an illustration of Abraham Lincoln. And a little farther on, we're going to be able to see a picture of his cabin in Kentucky, which is something we're going to be reading about today in our story, because our story starts when Abraham Lincoln was young. But here in our Thomas Hughes Public Library, we happen to have a book about Abraham Lincoln. We thought that was very interesting, and we wanted to share that with everybody. So we're going to set that one to the side, and we're going to get ready to read Abe Lincoln, the Boy Who Loved Books. In the wilds of Kentucky, 1809, a boy was born. His mother called him Abraham, his last name Lincoln. His bed was made from corn husks, his covers skins from bears, his cabin built with logs from towering trees. Abe said his first words in that one-room cabin, took his first steps on a hard dirt floor. The wood fire chased the cold and cooked corn pone. The door swung open, shut on leather hinges. A tiny window looked out on his world. When he was 2, his folks packed their few goods, moved Abe and Sister Sarah to Knob Creek. The Cumberland Trail ran close to their new cabin. Abe saw peddlers, pioneers, politicians, traders, slaves pass by. As Abe grew, he talked to travelers, heard where they had been, where they were going. He saw their world was wider than his own. His ideas stretched, his questions rose, his dreams were stirred. At school, he worked with numbers 1 to 10. He shaped his letters A to Z with a charcoal stick. He wrote them down day in, day out, in school, at home, in dust, in snow, on logs of wood. The letters cast a magic spell. He loved to learn. His parents had no schooling, but when day was done, the family sat close by the fire. His mother shared the Bible stories she knew by heart. His father spun yarns, told jokes, and made them laugh. When Abe was 7, the family moved again. The Lincolns set out one December morning, their bits and pieces piled on 2 stout horses. They walked and rode 100 miles to Indiana. They crossed the Ohio River on a makeshift ferry. Abe helped his father hack a trail through forest thick with trees and tangled vines, until at last they came to land they claimed. No cabin waited at Little Pigeon Creek. Instead, a half-faced camp of branches, twigs, and logs was where they had to stay. One side opened wide to wilderness. The family kept the woodpile stacked. The blazing fire scared off wild animals that roamed the woods. Bears growled, wolves howled, panthers screamed. Abe shivered. Dark was a fearsome time. Then settlers came to help the family raise a home. Now Abe and Sarah had a loft to call their own. Abe loved to climb up to his sleeping place, but snow and wind blew through the cabin's cracks. The outside crept indoors and iced the walls. Just once, Abe shot a turkey in the woods, but not again. He vowed he would not take the breath from living things. When Abe was 8, he helped his father clear their land. He learned to swing an axe and fell the trees. But he longed to learn from books, go back to school. When Abe turned 9, dark days fell upon him. Milk sickness took his mother to her grave. Abe whittled pegs to put in her pine coffin. His grief so deep, he could not speak her name. A year limped by. His father went to find a wife. He brought back a widow with 3 children. Her heart so wide, she took in Abe and Sarah as her kin. And she owned books. She let Abe read when chores were done. Once more, their house of logs became a home. She sent the children back to school. Abe wore 2 short buckskins and a raccoon cap. He drew his letters with a turkey buzzard quill. Abraham Lincoln, his hand and pen, he will be good, but God knows when. He learned to add, subtract on planks of wood. But most of all, he loved to read, win spelling bees, spin yarns, tell tales. When school was shut, Abe hired out to farmers. His father kept the earnings for the family. Abe split rails, dug wells, chopped trees. But all the while he worked, he yearned to learn. To anyone who'd listen, he'd like to say, "The things I want to know are in books." Once rain leaked through the cabin roof and soaked a book he'd borrowed. For 3 hot days, Abe pulled stalks of corn in his friend's field to pay him back. When Abe plowed, a book sat in his back pocket. At each row's end, he'd take it out and read. His horse would wait for him to turn the page. The neighbors shook their heads and called him lazy. They did not understand this bookish boy. Abe knew he must move on, out of the wilderness. Splitting rails and plowing land was not his dream. At 19, he pulled a flatboat down the river. Saw people and places beyond backwoods. Saw black men, women, and their children bound in chains. A sign above their head read, "Auction block." A life for sale, like hatchet, axe, or plow. Abe knew it was unjust to own another. New Salem, Illinois was where Abe settled. 100 folk or more lived in this place. He hired on to run the general store. Folks like to tell that once he overcharged someone 6 cents, but honest Abe walked miles to give it back. From here, Abe was asked to prove his worth with brawn, not brains. The owner of Abe's store set up a wrestling match against the leader of a wild and rowdy gang. Reluctantly, Abe took Jack Armstrong on. Some said that Abe pinned Jack to the floor. Others swore Armstrong beat Abe with a trick. But when Jack saw Abe's strength, he shook his hand, and they became close friends in years to come. By firelight, he studied law without a teacher. Soon he became a lawyer in the courts. Abe saw that words could free or jail a man. He found that words could change the way folks thought. When politics began to call his name, Abe aimed his words at wrongs he'd like to right. Friends said that he should run for public office. He tried for Congress first and then Senate. At last, he ran for the highest office in the land. Abraham Lincoln, born in a log cabin, child of the frontier, head in a book, elected our 16th president. From the wilderness to the White House, he learned the power of words and used them well. Abe Lincoln, the boy who loved books. We would love to see your very best picture of Abe Lincoln. You could draw him when he was young, or you could draw him when he was older, like the picture we saw from our rugby book. Thank you.